And joining me now from London is Dr. Martin Farr, a specialist in contemporary British history at Newcastle University. Thank you so much for your time. We're now hearing about how, in an unprecedented move, UK MPs are looking to lodge a parliamentary motion to strip the Prince of his dukedom. He's already said he won't be using the title, so what exactly does this move mean?
Yes, attitudes are hardening to the situation. I think the palace was hoping they were ahead of the curve in persuading the prince, although I'm sure there was not much alternative, that he should relinquish his use of the titles. The king apparently did not want Parliament to be bothered and to use up parliamentary time by the legal requirement of the titles being cancelled. So he will henceforth simply be known as Prince Andrew because he was born the son of a monarch. But MPs, and one MP in particular, an MP for York, and of course he was Duke of York, is very keen for this to go further. And there's a momentum to the story now, which is, I think, fed by the rumours that we hear, the sense that we have that Prince William, the Prince of Wales, who will be the next king, is very keen for there to be an even harder break with Prince Andrew than his father's prepared to countenance. And if this law were to be passed, and it's really only conjecture and discussion today, there's no moves by government to do this. Government's been very keen not to be associated with it. That would make it much easier for William to enact the necessary measures on the event of him becoming king.
I want to come back to William's response to all of this in a moment, but on Thursday, the King is to meet Pope Leo at the Vatican, where in an historic occasion, the monarch and the leader of the Roman Catholic Church are going to pray together in the Sistine Chapel. But the Epstein scandal has very much overshadowed all of this, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean, these are historic events. This was always going to be a transitional monarchy, given the age of the king, but it's been a very successful monarchy in so many ways. The transition was extremely smooth from Elizabeth II to Charles III. He's being treated for cancer. He's doing very well in terms of public opinion. His public events are very successful. This meeting with the Pope today is truly historic, and yet but more than drip drip, it's a thud of news stories about his brother. And there's more to come. I mean, they were briefed in advance of the book published today by Virginia Giuffre, but also the so-called Epstein papers in the United States. And there's pressure on President Trump to release more of the documents, have more details in them, we're told, which may be as grim, if not grimmer, than the ones we already know.
And as you point out, the story keeps snowballing day by day, and it's clearly damaging the image of the royal family. So what exactly can the palace do next?
It has the potential to damage the royal family. I mean, there are many examples in history, and certainly in the last 100 years or so, when they've had mass communications, where the royal family has faced a crisis, sometimes an existential crisis, such as the abdication crisis in 1936, where, generally speaking, they're sufficiently adaptable and sufficiently shrewd and take advice and act on the advice that they manage to swerve and avoid this becoming more serious. Another example with the death of Diana in 1997 and the Queen initially misreading the public response and then being advised by her Prime Minister to respond in a different way. So they're quite adept at dealing with this sort of situation. And the king has a cleaner pair of hands than his mother, who we hear was very fond of Andrew. He could be slightly more, should we say, decisive, but nothing like as decisive as we hear his son intends to be. So it is a crisis. It has the potential to damage the institution, not merely in Britain, but internationally. I mean, he is the king of 14 realms, including Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. This does enormous damage potentially to the institution of monarchy internationally. And by virtue of that, a big part of the UK's reputation internationally. It rests a great deal on the appeal of the monarchy and on London as a place to visit. So it's vitally important, and I'm sure the palace knows this, that this needs to be closed down as quickly as possible. And I suspect we haven't heard the last of the palace's response to the stories.
And as you were saying earlier, Prince William has made it clear to those close to him that he certainly wants to go further than his father in isolating Andrew from the royal family. But in terms of what is possible, I mean, what could be the likely scenario 10, 15 years or whenever down the track?
Well, I hesitate to speculate as to what may happen. But one of the stories today in the papers, I'm sure you know, is the fact that Prince Andrew's been living in this enormous house in Windsor Great Park outside the security cordon, so it requires extra money to be spent for security, and has been paying a peppercorn rent, so effectively no rent for 20 years. This plays very badly with a population and public which are having very low standards of economic growth, very little change in their living standards. It plays very badly in terms of how the monarchy appears to the public. They've cut down the roles to working roles. They've been very keen to suggest sacrifice and duty as part of their unspoken contract with the British people. And this sits very ill with it. And so one could imagine in the future him living in much more modest circumstances privately. And there are precedents in the royal family for that too. But certainly no more public profile for the prince. Even as we saw last year, his presence at the royal family's Christmas at Sandringham in Norfolk. He will, I suspect, be publicly invisible, apart from a few long lens photos of him riding in Windsor Great Park.
But the longer this goes on and the more revelations are revealed, there's a danger, is there not, that it fuels the Republican sentiment, not just in places such as my home country, Australia or Canada, but also within the UK too?
Oh, indeed. And that's partly the challenge that, I mean, it's an extraordinary situation that an advanced democracy has a monarchy, and it's a popular monarchy by and large, although most people are indifferent rather than enthusiastic. Few are actually hostile. There's no real Republican movement in Britain as there is in Australia with the referendum, of course. But this is the type of thing which won't do it. I think the public can see, as it were, to use a British idiom, that we're dealing with a wrong 'un here, and that the institution itself is sound and is concerned with public duty and public service. And in the form of Prince William and Princess of Wales and their family, we have almost out of central casting the ideal next generation of royals to manage the transition from one reign to another.
Do you think, however, that the royal family will survive in that transitional period between when the king is currently in power to when his son assumes the throne?
I suspect so. This was the moment for Republicans in Britain and in Australia when the late Queen passed. That was the moment when we went from an extremely popular monarch, 75 years on the throne, to someone who had been mildly controversial as Prince of Wales. But in fact, it was extremely smoothly and seamlessly done. The Prince of Wales was the most qualified king in history, as it were, having been heir to the throne for so long, knew what was required, and has been absolutely flawless in his execution of it. So my suspicion is this will endure. It will be harder to see this being a long-term concern in the realms around the Commonwealth, and indeed we're having referendums on a republic in Jamaica very shortly. I think it's in train in Jamaica to become a republic. Barbados 2 years ago. So that won't go away. Britain will be the last place where that is the case. And of course, there are other European monarchs too, and they've succeeded by adapting to circumstances, by living within their means, crucially, and by not being seen to be taking advantage of their position. The bicycling monarchies of continental Europe, it's not quite what would happen or what would be popular here, but certainly the marginalisation of someone who's seen to be an embarrassment both to the family and the country is likely to take place.
Dr. Martin Farr, thank you so much for your thoughts.